Hey, Mike with Nerd Problems Gaming here, the channel where we go through the good and bad of everything nerdy to make sure you spend your time on the best of the best. In today's video, I'll be going through my top 5 turn-based RPGs for Nintendo Switch, so let's get into it. So a couple quick things to go over before we jump into the video. These are my top 5 picks for turn-based RPGs on Nintendo Switch, so there might be a bunch of other great ones out there, and I may just not have played them yet. So definitely let me know in the comments below if your game did not make the list. I'd love to hear about it. I'm always down to check out new great RPGs on the system. Also, I know that the Nintendo Switch has several RPGs that you can play in the Nintendo Switch Online archive where they have SNES games and NES games, and I'm not going to be covering any of those in this video because I think that's going to be better suited to a different video that's covering RPGs on those specific systems. Also, some of the games in this video are available on other systems and platforms, so you can pick them up there, but you can also pick them up on Nintendo Switch and in the Nintendo Switch eShop. But with that being said, let's jump into the games and get into the top 5 turn-based RPGs for Nintendo Switch. So the first game on the list is a Nintendo Switch exclusive, and that's Octopath Traveler. And this is a pretty unique turn-based RPG that came out for Nintendo Switch where it focuses on the story of 8 different characters, and they all kind of have their own unique storyline as you play, unique goals as you play. And for the most part, the storylines don't necessarily really intertwine with each other. And so it's pretty unique in the sense that you can pick one of these 8 starting characters and begin the game as them. And so you start out as just one character, but then as you complete chapters of this character's story, you can go through and recruit the other characters throughout the game. And so that creates a pretty unique experience where you could play this game multiple times, starting as different characters and really building out your adventure as you choose. Another cool thing with this game is that it has that Super Nintendo style graphics, but then they also give it a modern twist where a lot of the background features look very realistic, and that's really cool, and it creates kind of a 2D mixed with a 3D environment as you play. Now, eventually, as you get to later in the game, there's a bunch of different kind of hidden, hard to reach quests. And if you do play all of these specific quests in a specific way, you actually do find out that some of the storylines do intermingle and intertwine, but that's kind of a hidden aspect of the game. I had to really look up exactly step by step how to get to that end quest to be able to reach that, but it is kind of a cool hidden gem that eventually the stories do intertwine if you go through all the hidden intricate details and quests of the game. Now, in this game, you also start with 8 different job classes, and you eventually do have the ability to unlock some more advanced hidden job classes or secret job classes as you play as well. And so what's really cool with this is each character has their unique primary job class and base job class, but then you can add a secondary job class on top of that. And so once you finally get all 8 characters, you can really mix and match and create this unique team with unique abilities and unique skill sets. On top of that, each character class has the ability to equip various different types of weapons. And what's also neat is in the battles, you can switch between various weapon types that you do have equipped. And this really plays into the strategic elements of the battles as well, where various monsters are going to have weaknesses that you'll expose as you fight them. And so when you first start off, you don't really know what the monster's weaknesses are, so you're going to be trying various different weapon types and spell types against them to see what works. Some of the characters do have an analyze ability where it does unlock what the weaknesses are kind of as you analyze them. But if you manually happen to find one of their weaknesses, it will unlock that for all future fights that you fight against that creature. And so this creates a cool dynamic where monsters have shield points basically, and what you can do is every time you hit them with one of their weaknesses, that goes down, and eventually you can break through those shields and then do massive damage when that monster's shield is down. Another cool aspect of the battle mechanics is that it plays a lot like the Bravely Default series. And so what that means is you can actually boost up your attacks or perform multiple attacks in a row as you build up this BP gauge on your characters. And so this creates a cool dynamic and strategy to the battles that isn't necessarily there in other turn-based RPGs. Another cool aspect of the game is that each individual character has special abilities that they can use outside of battle as well. So when you're walking through towns, talking to NPCs, you'll have the option to do these various abilities. So whether that's stealing from them, if you're the merchant, you can buy goods off these characters. There's options where you can fight them and duel them and knock them out and be able to get past certain characters. So it's another cool element to the game. But at the same time, as the thief character, for example, you can unlock treasure chests as you're out and about. And so I found myself frequently just always having that thief in the team so I could do that. And so it kind of limited me on the character combinations in my party I would have at a given time. Also, each character has their base job class that remains the same all the time, and you can switch out that secondary job class. And so for me, I kind of developed different play styles that I liked and combinations that I felt worked well together. And I found that as I played later in the game, some characters I didn't really use that much. And it wasn't until the ultimate final battle where you're using all characters at once, I found that a lot of my characters that I didn't use for a big chunk of the game were very underpowered and under-leveled. And so I had to end up going back and grinding a lot just to be able to level these characters up so they were on par with my other characters that I used all the time. So in some aspects, the game can get grindy, and for me, I like that in a game, but other people might not necessarily like that aspect of this turn-based RPG. Also, I'd say some of the regular type battles tend to get a little bit repetitive, but when you do get to the boss fights and more grand scale battles, they do get pretty intense. They get very challenging, and it might take you several times to beat them, even if you are grinding and leveling up your characters a bunch, because it really matters what order you do attacks in, how you use that boost effect to your advantage, breaking enemies and attacking their weaknesses really matter. And so there's a lot of strategic elements to this game that play into it as well. But I highly recommend checking this out, as I think it's one of the best turn-based RPGs on the Nintendo Switch. The next game on the list is Dragon Quest XI, and this is the Ultimate Edition that they have on the Nintendo Switch. And so when I first played this game, I put a ton of hours into this game. They have some special modes with the game as well where you can play, they call it a Draconian Quest, and you have the ability to add extra difficulty elements to the game. So it can be things like not running, the monsters are extra hard, you can't buy items from shops, and more. And so that's how I played the game, with a bunch of these harder difficulty elements wrapped into it, and I put in over 300 hours into this game. So if you want a big, meaty game, this is definitely the game for you. One of the big reasons I really love this game is the storyline is amazing. There's a great cast of characters. They all play off each other well. The voice acting is great. And like I said, this storyline is one of my favorites out of all the Dragon Quest series, especially if you make it to the very ultimate ending of the game. There's a cool, unique twist of how it ties in with the other Dragon Quest games, and that really blew me away when I got to that point of the game, and just seeing that reveal of the storyline was super awesome if you're a fan of the Dragon Quest series. One thing that's really neat too is the fact that there's kind of three main acts of the game. So you've got your first part of the storyline, and then you have kind of a major event in the storyline, and then it gets into Act 2, and then you beat kind of the final ending, and then it unlocks a third act after that as well. And so most Dragon Quest games, starting from Dragon Quest V, have this additional element to it, where they kind of have an after the end game story element, or maybe an extra dungeon to the game. And for the most part, in most Dragon Quest games, it's maybe 1 or 2 hours of extra play time. You might have a couple more hours in there if you have to grind and level up your characters to beat some of the bosses, but it's just kind of a little extra bonus dungeon, where in this game, there was so much extra content after you beat that supposed final ending of the game. I put in probably around an extra 80 to 100 hours in this after game area. So there's a lot of content that you're going to get out of this game, and this is why it's one of my favorite turn-based RPGs on the system. Now again, it's cool, it adds a lot of the traditional turn-based RPG elements with the game, but then also adds in some new twists as well. So the level up mechanic is really cool, because when you level up, you have kind of a grid that you can move and choose from how you want to level up your character. So you might be improving your abilities in specific weapon types, you might be learning new abilities, and the branching paths go in so many different directions. It just gives you a lot of options, which is really cool. It reminded me a lot of the original Final Fantasy X and that sphere grid that they created. And that's kind of how you moved around and leveled up your characters in this game as well. The graphics are really cool too, where they're based on the artwork of Akira Toriyama, creator of Dragon Ball and the other Dragon Quest artwork in the series. And so that's really cool because you get that feel of it. But also a lot of the armor and equipment that your characters are wearing are very developed graphically as well, where you can see a lot of the textures like the metals and the leather armors and various things like that. And it's really cool and they stand out and look phenomenal. Another cool aspect of this Nintendo Switch Definitive version is it actually gives you the ability to switch back and forth between the modern day graphics and Super Nintendo-like graphics. And so that's really cool where you can play this kind of more traditional Dragon Quest style right alongside the more advanced version in this game. So that might even give you the opportunity, if you don't want to switch back and forth, basically to rebeat the entire game again in the older school graphics, in addition to playing it through with the modern graphics. But again, there's a ton to this game. I sunk hundreds of hours into this game and I want to just go back and play it again as well. So I highly recommend picking up this game. This is one of the best turn-based RPGs on the system. All right, so the next game on the list you can pick up on various systems and it has been released in different ways over the years. But in my opinion, it's one of the best turn-based RPGs, let alone now that you can access it on the go on the Nintendo Switch. I think it's worth mentioning. And the game is Final Fantasy VII. So they recently did a remake of this game on modern systems, but this is the original version, but it also has some additional cool features to the game as well with this Nintendo Switch version. So with this Nintendo Switch version, you have the ability to play in triple speed. There's a no encounter mode. So if you're trying to get through areas, you can actually eliminate random encounters. And it also has a battle enhanced mode. And this basically makes all of your characters continually heal themselves and get into their limit break right away when you're fighting battles. So it can make certain battles a little bit easier if you want to just breeze through the story. But like I said, this is one of the best turn-based RPGs of all time, in my opinion. It's one of my favorite Final Fantasy games and favorite RPGs as well. So in the storyline, you take charge of Cloud Strife, and he partners up with a vigilante band called Avalanche, and they basically take on the evil Shinra Corporation that is destroying the environment by sucking Mako energy out of the planet for wealth and power. And so in addition to this, evil Sephiroth is trying to take out the planet and summon Meteor to destroy the world to absorb all of this Mako energy and to become the ultimate being. So it's a great story that involves epic battles between good and evil. And like I said, it's one of the best RPG storylines out there. So you should really pick up this game if you haven't. I also love the battle mechanics of this game. Again, it's that traditional turn-based RPG, but they added a lot of cool elements like summoning monsters in this game. And it was one of the first 3D RPGs that I played growing up. So it was such a cool experience to see that transition from 16-bit graphics into that 3D environment and seeing these battle scenes and summons and cutscenes as well. Certainly the graphics don't necessarily hold up today compared to what they were back then, but it was revolutionary for its time. And despite the graphical limitations, looking at it today, it's still a blast to play. On top of that, it has a lot of cool elements like the materia system that they introduced into this game, where your weapons can hold various spells and abilities from this magic materia. And so it allows you to customize your characters for a playstyle that you want, and allows for some really cool combinations within the game. On top of that, there's a battle arena where you can duke it out and get great prizes to enhance your characters. And it's pretty challenging, where you go in with one character and you just fight enemy after enemy after enemy. And each round you're getting more status ailments and negative effects put on you. But if you come out at the end and survive, you get some great prizes that you can use to further enhance your characters. On top of that, the game has some of the best RPG mini games out there. A couple of them being chocobo breeding and racing. And so these are like giant chickens that act like race horses. And so you can breed them and race them in the game. And each one has these unique abilities where some can travel over rivers, some can climb mountains, some can do everything, climbing oceans and mountains and rivers, and can unlock secret areas and items hidden throughout the game. So again, this game is a blast. It's one of the best turn-based RPGs ever, and you can pick up this enhanced version on the Nintendo Switch, and I highly recommend it. All right, the next game on the list is Knights of Pen and Paper. And so this is a really cool concept of a game where you're playing as people playing Dungeons and Dragons or a tabletop RPG. And so it's really cool. It reminds me a lot of the show Harmon Quest, where it constantly is breaking the fourth wall, where you're playing as players playing Dungeons and Dragons. So the game itself reminds me of the first original Final Fantasy game, where you start out picking various character types, be it like the jock, the teacher, the nerd, the pizza boy, and more. And so you have that outside world where people are playing the game and you can choose those type of characters, but then you also choose the in-game classes as well. So you're playing things like the barbarian, the mage, the cleric, the rogue, and more in this D&D type world. So like I said, it's a quirky, fun story where you're going through not only the game storyline, but also breaking the fourth wall, chatting with the dungeon master, and having funny commentary along the way with that as well. So not only are you building up your characters in this pen and paper world, which is more of an old school traditional RPG, you're also able to level up and build up your characters in the outside world. So you're buying snacks for your party, you're upgrading the table you're playing on, you're getting loaded dice, you're buying posters and refrigerators and decorating the room, and all these things upgrade and enhance your abilities within the game on top of building up your characters in the game as well. Now the game itself is pretty strategic and it can get quite difficult even if you're familiar with turn-based RPGs. And so each character type is going to have their own unique abilities that they can use, and you need to strategize and play off each other effectively to get past the various challenges and dungeons in the game. On top of that, if you're into nerdy culture or gaming culture, there's a lot of different references to classic movies like Ghostbusters and classic video games like Pokemon scattered throughout the game as well. On top of that, when you beat the game, you unlock a new game plus where you can carry over all of your characters and stats, but then the monsters get that much harder as you play. On top of that, you can recruit different characters as you go, switch out people in your team in between dungeons, and so it gives you a lot of replayability with the game to experience the game over and over again with a different cast of characters playing through it. It's also a smaller indie game, so it's not super expensive and great addition to your nerd library. And I highly recommend checking out this amazing turn-based RPG on the Switch. All right, number 5 on the list of the best turn-based RPGs on Nintendo Switch is Battle Chasers Night War. And so this game takes a lot of old school mechanics, but puts them into a new RPG. And so for me, I actually avoided this game for a long time. I had seen it a bunch in various sales that were going on. But for me, the name of the game actually turned me away from it. I thought it sounded kind of dumb, and so I avoided it for a while. But I eventually decided to pick it up and check it out, and I was very pleasantly surprised, and it's one of my favorite turn-based RPGs on the Switch now. And so the game itself, the storyline is nothing too crazy, where you play as a band of heroes and misfits, and they kind of fit into the classic fantasy style tropes that you see. So you've got the sassy lady, you've got the tough macho warrior with a war-torn past, you've got a robot type character that's trying to develop his humanity, you've got a young girl that has amazing power that's trying to come of age and find her role in the world, and more. And so it doesn't necessarily take away from the game, but it's also not maybe anything revolutionary that you've never seen before. On top of it, another cool aspect with this game is that it's based on a comic series, so the artwork is really cool. So it's that comic book style, cel shaded type graphics. And so that's really cool to see. As you're running around the world map, it's kind of like a 3D comic book as you play. So like I said, the story centers around the young girl who has these amazing gauntlets, which are kind of like the Infinity Gauntlets almost in the Marvel universe, where they're super powerful and everyone's trying to get their hands on them. And the other band of heroes is trying to protect her and keep her safe. Now at the beginning of the game, their airship crashes on this island. And so a lot of the party is all split up across the island, and it's your job to find the other party members, reunite forces, and really unravel the mysteries of this island and what's going on, while keeping this main girl safe from danger. And so what really makes this game shine though is the battle mechanics and gameplay of the game. So you'll go through and you'll be able to go through various dungeons throughout the game, but what's cool is that you can actually pick the difficulty of the various dungeons as you go through. And so the dungeons themselves are also randomly generated to some extent, so it's different each time you go through on how the map comes about as you play. But on top of that, if you play on higher difficulties, you unlock better equipment and find better items throughout the playthrough as well. And so I kept finding myself going back and playing through the same dungeons a bunch of different times on harder and harder difficulties in order to get better equipment for my characters. The game also has a cool battle element to it where you develop these overdrive abilities, and so you build up points in these meters as you play. And so you could normally use your MP to use specific abilities, but if you build up enough of these points, you can basically use them for free. And so it creates some unique strategies to the game, because if you're spending your MP, it can make it pretty hard to get through the dungeons. But if you strategize correctly, you can build up these overdrive points to use these abilities for free. There's a lot of other cool abilities as well that you get as you play in the battles, and they all kind of feed off of each other, which creates some cool dynamics in the gameplay as well. So whether it's using different status elements where you're poisoning an enemy and then attacking them with another ability that does extra damage now, or if somebody's burned, it might do extra damage, or kind of using different abilities back to back to unlock superpowers. It has a lot of cool aspects to the game and really makes you strategize every time you play. And if you don't, you're probably going to get destroyed by the enemies as you go through, especially on the harder difficulties. Another thing that's really cool is that when you level up, you go into the option of picking different abilities that you can level up. And so this might increase your hit points, it might give you special perks or extra damage, or make swords more powerful, again, whatever the case might be. And so you can mix and match these different things as you level up. So it really allows you to customize your character in the ways that you want, and you can even do this in a way that different characters that you have in the party, so that's really cool. Another neat aspect is that the different equipment that you get as you play has different rarity levels and abilities as well. So not only can you find different equipment as you go along, you can customize equipment, you can craft equipment, you can build in certain abilities like maybe regeneration or extra damage, or a variety of other different abilities as you play, and so that's really cool. Another neat thing too is that you can upgrade the various shops and stores in the game as well, unlocking better equipment that you can buy or craft, or again, whatever the case might be. All the characters also have kind of hidden, unique ultimate weapons throughout the game, so you'll find yourself going through these additional quests to find this unique ultimate equipment as you go. And that was fun, going through and fighting these unique bosses, unlocking more of the story to find those aspects of the game as well. I will say though, this game gets very grindy, so if you don't like that aspect in an RPG, you might not enjoy this. But again, if you're looking for that traditional turn-based, grindy, leveling up RPG, this is a great one to check out. But again guys, this was the top 5 turn-based RPGs for the Nintendo Switch. Let me know in the comments below if your game made the list, if there's others I should check out. I'd love to hear more about different games I should play. So let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, be sure to smash that like button, as it really helps out the channel. If you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications to get the latest updates of new nerd videos we put out. And if you'd like to help us support the channel, pick out content and more, become a patron of ours at nerdproblemsgaming.com/Patreon. And if you'd like to plug into our live streams and Let's Plays we do on the channel, you can follow us on Twitch at nerdproblemsgaming.com/Twitch. But once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you more soon.